An English bank clerk named Jarvis Lorry and a young woman named Lucie Manette are traveling through the dead of night to Paris. Lucie has been told her entire life that her father is dead. Lorry reveals the truth. Her father, the esteemed Dr. Manette, is alive. He has been locked in secret, solitary confinement inside the Bastille prison for 18 years. They find him hidden in the garret of a Parisian wine shop owned by his former servant, Ernest Defarge. Dr. Manette is completely broken. He spends his days obsessively making shoes, unable to remember his own name. Lucie immediately takes him back to London to heal. He gradually regains his mind in the safety of England. But that 18-year nightmare in a French dungeon leaves a deep, unresolved scar, one that will inevitably pull everyone around him back into the violence brewing across the Channel. 5 years later, in a London courtroom, a French aristocrat named Charles Darnay is on trial for his life. He stands accused of passing state secrets to France, a treason charge that carries an automatic death sentence. Darnay's defense team includes an alcoholic, deeply cynical lawyer named Sydney Carton. Despite his bleak outlook and slouched posture, Carton shares a bizarre physical trait with the accused. The two men look remarkably identical. Carton leverages this to their advantage. He draws the court's attention to their shared face, destroying the prosecution witness's ability to definitively identify Darnay as the spy. The confusion forces the jury to acquit him. In the aftermath of the trial, both men become fixtures in the Manette household, and both fall deeply in love with Lucie. Ultimately, she chooses the earnest, optimistic Darnay, and the two are married. Carton does not fight her decision. He confesses to Lucie that he knows his life is wasted and he is too damaged for her to love. But he makes her a solemn vow. He would do anything, even give his own life, to protect her and anyone she cares about. Two identical faces now reflect completely different lives. One is building a family and a hopeful future. The other has accepted a path of ruin. Yet both men are now anchored to the survival of the exact same woman. Meanwhile, the situation in France is deteriorating. The ruling class treats the peasantry with systemic cruelty. This is perfectly captured by Darnay's own uncle, the Marquis Evrémonde, who runs over and kills a peasant child in his carriage, merely complaining that the incident might have injured his horses. The following morning, the Marquis is found stabbed to death in his bed. The child's father, Gaspar, has replaced his grief with a blade, signaling a violent turn for the Parisian peasantry. At the center of this rising anger is the Parisian wine shop. Here, Ernest Defarge's wife, Madame Defarge, sits quietly making a registry. Into her knitting, she weaves a coded hit list of every aristocrat the peasants plan to slaughter. After the Marquis is assassinated, she knits the Evrémonde family name into her deadly ledger. It is a title Charles Darnay has secretly renounced, but to the revolutionaries, blood is blood. By 1789, the tension snaps. The French Revolution explodes into the streets, with the Defarges personally leading a violent mob to storm the Bastille prison. The initial street riots rapidly harden into a methodical, bureaucratic machine. The revolutionaries take control of the state apparatus, executing a highly organized plan to systematically wipe out the entire French ruling class. Back in London, Darnay receives an urgent plea from a loyal servant, who has been imprisoned by the new regime. He crosses the Channel to help, but the moment he enters radicalized Paris, he is identified as an Evrémonde and thrown into jail. Lucie and Dr. Manette rush to France to save him. Manette weaponizes his past to their advantage. As a former prisoner of the Bastille, he is revered as a living martyr by the mob, and he successfully uses his political leverage to secure Darnay's release. But Madame Defarge refuses to let an Evrémonde escape. She produces a hidden diary her husband tore from the walls of Dr. Manette's old cell during the storming of the Bastille. The fragile pages detail exactly why Manette was locked away decades ago. He had been called to treat a young peasant girl who was brutally raped by the Evrémonde Butters, Charles Darnay's father and uncle. When Manette tried to report the crime, the Evrémondes used their power to bury him in solitary confinement. The court reads this testimony aloud. Darnay is instantly condemned to the guillotine. He is sentenced to die by the written words of his own father-in-law, forced to pay the ultimate price for family sins he had spent his entire adult life trying to escape. Sydney Carton arrives in Paris just as the situation reaches its breaking point. Eavesdropping at the wine shop, he discovers Madame Defarge intends to accuse Lucie and her young daughter next. Knowing time is up, Carton decides to cash in the solemn promise he made to Lucie years ago. He tracks down a British spy working inside the French prisons and blackmails him to gain temporary access to Darnay's holding cell. Once inside, Carton relies on their identical faces to orchestrate a desperate magic trick. He drugs the condemned man, knocking him completely unconscious, and quickly strips off his fine coat to swap their clothes. The guards carry the unconscious Darnay out of the cell, believing him to be the fainting visiting lawyer. They load him into Jardis Laurie's waiting carriage, leaving Carton sitting in the darkness in his place. Carton's face once saved Darnay from a British noose by creating courtroom chaos. Today, it saves him from a French guillotine through absolute sacrifice. Laurie, Dr. Manette, and Lucie race toward the English border with the unconscious Darnay hidden in the carriage, knowing that if the ruse is discovered before they cross, they will all be executed. Back in Paris, Madame Defarge marches to Lucie's apartment to make her arrests, only to find it completely empty, except for Lucie's fiercely loyal British servant, Miss Pross. A violent physical struggle breaks out between the two women, ending with Madame Defarge shot dead by her own pistol. At the exact same time, the death carts roll through the streets of Paris. Sydney Carton stands in the execution line, successfully passing as the hated Marquis Evrémonde to the screaming crowds. Carton keeps his eyes fixed on a terrified young seamstress, who has realized he is an imposter. He comforts her, holding her hand as they walk up the wooden steps toward the blade together. Sydney Carton goes to his death having finally found the meaning he spent his entire life searching for. He willingly trades his broken, directionless existence to buy a long, peaceful future for the only people he ever loved.